Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Yeadon, and I'm one of the co-owners and managing directors with Impetus Digital. For those of you who do not know what Impetus Digital is we're a company that has built some of the best-in-class asynchronous and synchronous virtual collaboration tools. And these tools have allowed a lot of our customers, and those are pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, other healthcare, life science type companies, run their advisory boards, their investigator meetings, steering committees, co-authorship groups, and even of late, since the COVID-19 pandemic, we've helped a lot of these teams virtualize their POA brand rollout meetings, their sales rep training, etc. But with all of that, we really believe at Impetus that everything starts with a thought. Big, hairy, audacious movements in the healthcare space start with the kinds of conversations that we're going to be having with some of these leading edge thinkers like Ville, like other people that we've interviewed in these fireside chats. And that is really the impetus behind having these types of discussions, is so that we can start moving the needle on creating positive disruption in healthcare in the fastest, most adaptive way, leveraging the groundswell of energy that's already underneath us. So welcome, Ville. We're so happy to have you here. Thank you for joining us in our fireside chat. So I want to introduce Ville Leppälä, and I know I did not get his name correct, and he's probably going to correct it for us afterwards. But again, an amazing person. He is the vertical lead for Varjo's research and healthcare business. We're going to dig into this because it's a Finnish company, and they've been revolutionizing reality, basically our current reality. And one day we're going to ask, what is reality? With the hardware and software that lets users seamlessly merge virtual, mixed, and traditional reality. And they've done this actually with some really interesting technology around the human eye. And we're going to dig into that a little bit more. And that's, I know, an area that Ville has been specialized in. Ville has a master's degree in mechanical engineering from the Aalto University. And before joining Varjo, he was the CEO of Junction. That was Europe's leading hackathon and a converging point where developers and designers and entrepreneurs from across the world got together to create positive disruption in all kinds of different areas. So super pleased to have you here, Ville. Thank you so much.
Great to be here. Thanks, Natalie, for the introduction. I'll be waiting for this and happy to share my thoughts on the domain.
That's beautiful. And so just because I know that I did not give very good service to your last name, can you please pronounce your name for the rest of us?
Right. So it's Ville Leppälä, or so they say in Finland.
Leppälä. I will get that by the end of this session. So that's great. So let's actually just start off with you, first of all. I mean, you have a very important role, a leading role in the company that you lead today, Varjo's. But let's take us a little bit through, you have a degree in mechanical engineering. How on earth did you end up in the place that you are today? What was that journey like for you?
That's right. So it's been an interesting journey. Actually started as an engineer at Varjo in the beginning. And I was working with some of the key R&D stuff that we were doing back in the days. And my role was a mechatronics engineer, so quite technical hardware stuff. But as you mentioned, I've been also working on other stuff previously, and once the company started to grow quite quickly and the business operations started to grow, then by a couple of coincidences, I then hopped into the business team and now heading the medical and healthcare vertical.
Fantastic. So tell us a little bit, there's a lot of components to Varjo. And so as we know, since COVID-19, it's acted a bit like an accelerant, if you will, specifically in the healthcare industry.
That's right.
Around leveraging and learning and doing all kinds of a variety of things. And virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality are all part of that groundswell. So can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing as a company before COVID and what has transpired for you since that time?
Yeah, so it's, when talking about the healthcare and medical field, we've had a strong focus, I'd say, in three fields. So the first one is related to medical training and simulation. So training medical professionals into different scenarios and procedures. Then secondly, there's an area of advanced visualizations and different kind of clinical use cases where, for example, X-ray images are visualized in a immersive way. And then thirdly, one important field is education. So educating med school students and so on and so forth for anatomy. And thinking how these have been changing through now the special year we've had. I'd say that one key change has been the evolvement of remote work, and this is also something that's super important for the medical field. So companies and hospitals have been super interested on creating different kind of remote capabilities. So obviously it's super important to minimize the infection risk, as well as then as there's all kinds of travel restrictions in place, it's not always even possible for people to travel into different places. So that's why there's been created all kinds of really interesting remote training capabilities through virtual reality, as well as, for example, remote consultation possibilities and features.
Fantastic. So I'm going to want to linger on a few of those because, again, how long has Varjo been around? Because, again, you don't usually get a lot of VR, AR companies that have quite specialized in medical. So,
that's
so
right.
how long have you been around, and how did you evolve into creating one of these areas? Medical is one of the subspecialties of your company.
So Varjo was founded actually 4 years ago, and the company, or our founder's background is actually in the former Nokia / Microsoft Mobile. So back in the days when there were these Nokia mobile phones and Microsoft mobile phones, all of our founders were actually working there and were working on the VR and XR development of the company. So actually they were founding the HoloLens project there. And after the business collapsed, they hopped off and started to work with Varjo, and basically were able to leverage the huge experience they had. And from those days, we've been developing the products, and now there's 3 products on the market: virtual reality and mixed reality, and we've been growing quickly. But how did we end up into the medical space? That's actually something we didn't originally plan of. So that wasn't something we had planned in our first kind of go-to-market plans, but actually it was something that evolved through customers. So customers started to come to us and say that, hey, this is something that they've been looking into for some time. Are you able to help? And actually through these interactions, we started to look more into that, and it was something around 1 year ago when then I started to head the business and actually put some effort into growing it.
That's fantastic. So I also just want to take a couple of steps back, because again, we have targets that are not only large pharmaceutical companies globally, but I'm also the lead for the trans tech community in Toronto, and also have a a global audience. So for the smaller entrepreneurs, the small businesses, these people who are in the neurotech space, or just, in general, as they're looking into developing markets, tell us a little bit about the journey that Varjo had taken 4 years ago. Was it bootstrapped? Did you get connected with an organization or an incubator? Tell us a little bit about, was there fundraising that was done? What has allowed you to go from where you started from inception to being where you are today 4 years later?
Right. So the company, I said, it was founded 4 years ago. We had 4 founders in the beginning with a really strong technological experience. And already from the first days, we've been also rather heavily venture capital backed. So to this date, I think we are the second most funded virtual reality or virtual / XR hardware related company. So I think Magic Leap is still leading this game, but
so you are new players in this space. Having said that, as you know, whenever there's new technologies, there's a lot of players that run in, everybody competes, and then sometimes the big five come around and you get big enough, and then somebody, that's traditionally how it works. It could be different for many of the companies like yourselves. Having said all of that, was just curious as to what messaging did Varjo create in the environment that you're in that got you so much venture backing? What was it that truly differentiated your company? And I'm assuming that there's like European-wide investors as opposed to just in Finland. I could be wrong, but
yeah,
what do you think? What was the messaging that you put across that made it such an alluring investment?
That's right. So I think one of the key points of Varjo already from the first dates has been human eye resolution. So we've been developing products that actually increase the barrier really high. So when we started, we saw that there's a huge potential for VR and XR. But then on the same time, we saw that actually the technology that's on the market is not capable of actually realizing these dreams of professional use. So for example, you could not read text in such VR as the picture quality is so blurry, or people got really sick, got nausea and cyber sickness and so on and so forth, and thus we saw that there's actually quite a lot of work to do in order to make this all possible. And based on that, we then started work to solve these problems, and we invented the so-called Bionic display that makes it possible to show content in a visual fidelity that's equivalent to a human 20/20 eyesight. So we talk about human eye resolution, and I think that was the first breakthrough we basically did, and started to actually create a scene of professional virtual reality.
So very interesting. So what you were able to bring, or Varjo was able to bring right from the beginning, was patentable technology that I guess nobody else really in your field, and that's what made it so attractive from the beginning.
Yes, that's right. And I think we're all in all in a really unique position. So obviously there are many competitors in the space with heavy funding, but all of those are basically focusing fully on entertainment and gaming, which I think leaves quite a big space open for us to serve the professional market.
I love it. Yeah. So I just want to linger a little bit on this bionic eye, which sounds to me like it's a real differentiator and something that's very special. So without giving away any of your IP, can you sort of, I mean, I think generally speaking, this audience, at least in general, understands what virtual reality is versus, augmented reality. But maybe you can actually describe the generalized experience of those with the players that are already providing that,
Yeah,
and what the bionic eye does in those experiences that makes it different.
Yeah. So so basically, the whole VR scene started to grow quite quickly after kind of the mobile phone displays developed when the iPhone came, and you know, those days the display technology started to be rather good, that you could actually set such small displays in front of your eyes. But actually, even though, you know, an iPhone display might look quite sharp, it is not when you bring it 2 centimeters or, you know, 1 inch away from your eyes. So at that distance, it's actually rather blurry. And people have been envisioning of much much sharper displays already for quite a while. But the problem has been that there is no such graphics processing units that could actually render or create that amount of pixels and so on and so forth. So that's why some unique innovations were needed. And the Bionic display is actually a really special way to overcome this issue. So we're basically mimicking the way the eye works. So we're not showing the highest resolution content for the whole field of view of the device, but we're actually showing the highest resolution image to the eye focus point, which means that we can basically trick the eye. So to the peripheral vision, we're showing like a much lower quality picture, whereas then to the center, we're showing the highest resolution. And that's basically what the way the eye works. And through this, we can actually then decrease the performance need of the computer and still get a really, really high visual fidelity.
Which actually is interesting, because overall as the product, you can decrease the cost of it, you said, and then the other sort of memory and other sorts of requirements of the hardware and potentially the software. So you just make the whole thing work a little bit more efficiently, which is really interesting how you've done that. So when we talk about everything that's happened recently, like I was saying, you know, everything is about work from home and do from home and learn from home and all these other things. So with this Bionic eye and this 2020 eye tracker system that you've trademarked, does this now allow learning to occur while you're in a virtual reality immersive experience? So, you know, without the Bionic tracker, is it just being in a kind of a low quality rendered environment? But now you can be in this virtual reality immersive experience, but be able to read a textbook, be able to read a manual, and participate in a learning activity while reading at the same time. Is that in essence what the point of the Bionic eye is, or is there some other use case that you have, you know, you were formulating?
Yeah, so obviously depends on what you're doing, but obviously reading is one example. So there's, when you read, there's small print and small text, and typically you need quite the sharp display to actually show that. But it's not only about reading, obviously. Thinking of, for example, medical use, you might want to examine really small anatomical structures and small details. And if you cannot see the detail, it's really hard to do any examination or diagnosis. Or for example, Boeing is currently using Varjo's technology to train astronauts in their Starliner space program. So Varjo has been basically the only possibility for them to create such training environments where astronauts can see the control panels of the space shuttle.
That is really, really cool. And I did see that on your website. So congratulations on that win. That's pretty impressive stuff.
Thanks.
So I'm going to want to linger a little bit about some of the work that you have done and what lies in the future, specifically as it relates to the medical field. So you said that customers approached you, and starting a year ago, if not earlier, and approached you with these opportunities, and you started to go down the rabbit hole and said, "There's something here." What have you created? Again, you don't need to give any confidential or proprietary information here, but in terms of just use cases, what are some of the things that Varjo has created in the medical area?
There's in the medical space, I think there's a couple of leading use cases. So one is related to medical simulation and training, and I think this is probably the quickest growing area right now. So this is an area where medical professionals are trained to different scenarios and procedures. And traditionally, obviously, it's been quite a lot work with, these mannequins and dolls. But as you know, they are not that immersive, and it's really difficult to create any special scenarios around them. But now what's evolving is that you actually can take this training into virtual or mixed reality and create extremely immersive training scenarios where you can create interaction and all kinds of variations in the training. And it's also really cost efficient.
And so when you're talking about interaction, let's just paint a picture. Let's just say, for example, you're in a surgical suite. Mm-hmm. And let's just say, for example, you've partnered with a medical device company where they've got a new saw or something that where you're implanting a new connector or something that's going on with a knee joint or something like this. So tell us a little bit, what's the interaction? Are you interacting with other people in that immersive experience? Are you interacting with tools? Are you interacting with a device? Maybe you can kind of explain the picture so people understand what it is that you built.
Yeah, of course. So, so within interaction, obviously, it can be team interaction, so interaction with other people around, but also it can mean all kinds of special complications that might occur during the procedure. So obviously, all humans are unique, and anatomies might vary quite a lot, and there might be some special conditions, and with kind of traditional hardware-based mannequins and such, it's rather difficult to create any variation. While as then when you're doing this simulation in virtual reality, this is actually really straightforward to do any variation, as it's something you can do with software. It scales really well.
So who is interested in this? I just mentioned potential partners, which I want to go into a little bit later, but who is doing this training and who's requesting it? Is it universities? Is it medical schools? Is it physicians, hospitals? Who are the people who are coming to Varjo and saying, we need this?
So I'd say that there's, well, obviously the first one is hospitals. So the end users who are employing lots of surgeons, nurses, all kinds of medical professionals. So they need to train. But then secondly, I'd say that there's also a big market around medical device and equipment manufacturers. So for them, it's obviously also training doctors and medical professionals. but the rationale is slightly different. So for them, it's often also teaching their customers to use their tools. So for example, the new saw you mentioned, the company might want to train their customers to use these new technologies.
Yeah, so very interesting on those potential partnerships. So I'm just curious as well too. So now Varjo is being able to provide this new way of learning and training, obviously very relevant in the post-pandemic era where people are not necessarily going to be in a face-to-face or going to be in the surgical suite. And so they're going to have to find these other mechanisms to continue with their training. But I'm also curious if you have seen a change in the potential requests or volume of need. On one school of thought, you would actually have people saying that there's not as many people that can get surgeries because of COVID. There's a lack of use of the surgical suites, and so there's going to be a backlog. Or there could be the other school of thought where there's going to be this backlog and a huge bolus coming through. People are always going to need their surgeries, et cetera. And maybe there's a democratization on who's actually administering certain parts of the surgical process. Maybe in some components, the nurse practitioners are going to be doing some things. And maybe perhaps it's not all just one particular type of practitioner. Have you seen since COVID-19 a changeover or a switch or an increase or a decrease in requests because of the pandemic, potentially the number of people that may be involved in a patient's surgical procedure? I'm just curious about what you've seen on your side.
Yeah, so that's actually an interesting question. So obviously, well, right now in Europe, I think the situation has been stabilizing quite a lot. And now I think we start to see quite a lot of demand after kind of the crisis phase is over, at least for now. And that's probably driven due to also demand that has been basically stalling for the crisis time. But then what comes to kind of addressing these special COVID related things, so obviously there are applications that are directly related to scalably training medical professionals for COVID response. So that's obviously one. But then secondly, as I said, there's quite a lot of really interesting remote capabilities trained or created right now. So one example of this is a customer right now who is actually building a capability for cardiologists to conduct heart team meetings in virtual reality. So meetings that they do typically face-to-face prior some really difficult heart surgeries, but now as they want to limit face-to-face time and the infection risk, they want to do it remotely, and they're finding new effective ways to do this.
And in those meetings then, Ville, it sounds like you're creating an environment for a virtual experience of a conference, but involved in that is the immersive teaching experience of being able to see how new equipment is used. Tell us a little bit about what this virtual reality conference or meeting is that you're creating for cardiologists.
Right, so that's obviously something that our customer is developing. So we're mostly supporting on the hardware side. As a tool, I think they are using Meeting VR, which is a partner of us on kind of the collaboration space.
Yeah.
And that makes it possible actually really easily to come up into a joint space and bring in assets and things that you want to be there in the meeting space.
Yeah, excellent. Brilliant. Yep, I know them well. And I did want to ask you, we're talking and lingering a little bit on, the obvious around medical and applications for training and, PPE management and all the other things that are going on post-COVID and onwards. But maybe we can kind of switch gears and talk about the applications of your software and hardware as it relates to medical research.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you have been dabbling or working on in that space around how people are doing clinical trials, creating clinical studies, looking at clinical papers? I was wondering if you can kind of illustrate that for us.
Yeah. Of course, as this is a new area, the research side is quite tightly linked into everything what we do. So obviously in all of these applications, there's quite a lot of research involved. But thinking of the research area, I'd say that probably the most active area is things related to psychology and neuroscience and all kinds of applications that utilize the eye tracker that's built into the device. And I think that's a super interesting area. So for example, there's one customer of us actually at the University of Helsinki who is using our device to assess children's cognitive functions. And with this, they're actually able to diagnose children's different kinds of disorders like the autism spectrum disorder or ADHD or all kinds of cognitive related diseases.
That is really, really interesting, especially since you've built the bionic eye technology in there and people are using it to do diagnostics. So with all of that said, as you probably know, both at the NIH and the FDA and other big health organizations across the globe, is they have accelerated and loosened the regulatory policies around software as a device and other sorts of things. And a lot of people have been moving in very swiftly and very quickly on, pulling through their algorithms, pushing through on getting named or approved as a prescriptive digital therapeutic. Has Varjo considered utilizing their patented bionic eye in conjunction with software and hardware as being a tool, for example, partnering with some of these neuroscientists and others to do an actual clinical study and then pulling through your product and software as an actual diagnostic?
So in overall, we see this as a great opportunity, obviously to accelerate the development and in the whole market. And of course, we do work with lots of researchers and academic around different fields. And as the medical and healthcare field is essentially spread out to quite small niche areas, there's all kinds of developments happening around here and there, but I definitely believe that this will be accelerating the change and the fact that the regulatory issues have been easing up slightly is good.
Yeah, and definitely lots of promise and opportunity there. So we're going to be watching that space very closely. I know that Varjo is also using, or people and customers are using it, specifically other medical device companies, either large or smaller startup, in helping to sort of design and engineer new technologies that they're bringing to the market. Can you talk a little bit about how your company is partnering with those organizations for the development of their wares and and products?
Yeah, so this is an interesting area as well. So obviously virtual reality and mixed reality has been used in all kinds of design and engineering applications already for a while. And there's lots of examples how this has been used in car design or all kinds of traditional engineering fields. But I think there's been now some really nice examples of, for example, pharmaceutical companies utilizing VR in their R&D, and essentially, I think it's about visualizing complex 3D structures in a way that's more easy to understand and more quicker to process and make iterations and communicate around it. So typically, as you probably know, it's rather difficult to go through these structures in a pure 2D screen. And then to add, actually, it's not only about visualizations, but it's also about digitalizing the design process. So traditionally, there's been all kinds of design softwares, but then when going to prototyping, things have been made then manually. So, for example, in the car industry, they built, clay models of the cars, and then obviously on the pharma side, they've been doing some actual tests. But nowadays, simulation softwares also make it possible to simulate these things digitally, which then saves quite a lot of time on the development roadmap, as well, things are just so much quicker when doing digitally.
So one of the things that you've been raising over and over, Ville, is the idea that your company is very focused on scalability, which makes sense. It sounds like you're very much of a software and a hardware play. But a lot of what you're talking about in terms of the use cases are extremely customized and focused on particular, very detailed use cases. How many of those are you actually developing customized software changes, modifications? And which one of those are like, you just buy this off the shelf, scale, use it the way you need to, send us your good news stories, and that's kind of about it. So which one of this is just the scalable, this is what we provide off the shelf, and what part of your company is really helping to shape and meld customizable things and potentially partnerships, IP, et cetera, from that?
Yeah, that's right. Many of the use cases are extremely specialized, and that's why we are partnering up with companies that are more who are experts in their domains. So we're experts in hardware and the software related to the hardware, but then to actually deliver complete solutions, for example, to a orthopedic surgeon, we do partner up with experts in that specific area, and this might mean partnering up with softwares that do specifically software for that application, or then it might mean partnering up with a researcher that is actually building something around that. So we basically ensured that developing such custom things is easy, and there's a clear documentation and compatibility for all the most used softwares and solutions.
So you bring up something important, and that is, it sounds like at the end of all of this, your key forte in the market is the hardware. So obviously in your website, you have 3 different models of what your headsets look like. Can you maybe describe a little bit about what's in those headsets? What makes them special and unique? And what's the difference between the three that you sell?
Yeah, so we do have a variety of devices. There's two devices for virtual reality. So virtual reality means now purely a world where you can see only the virtual content. And both are capable for human eye resolution. So the same promise applies here, and both do have the built-in eye tracker. But what's the difference there is that the VR, so the first one is VR2 and the second one is the VR2 Pro. And the difference between these is that the VR2 Pro device includes a built-in hand tracker. And hand tracking means that that even though you're in a virtual environment, we can track your hand movements. And this means that you can actually bring in your hands to the VR world and interact with virtual objects with your own hands. So you can, for example, press virtual buttons with your own hands. So these are the VR products, but then we do have also products on the mixed reality side. And mixed reality now means the ability to actually start mixing the virtual content into the real world around you. And our approach into this has been a technology called video pass-through. And this means that we're not adding holograms in front of you or in your visual field, but we're actually streaming in everything around you through two high-quality video cameras. And that video is then revealed through the normal VR displays we have, and this is unique. This is a unique approach in the sense that it enables obviously us to add in objects in front of you. So if you're standing here, I could add let's say a car in front of me. So the same as with let's say HoloLens, if you know. But that it's not only limited to that, but we can also remove objects around. So as we're fully controlling the view around you through these cameras and displays, we can also remove things. So when I'm looking here, I see a display here in the wall, and theoretically I could now remove the display from the wall and see just the wall. So it's mixed reality in the sense that you can manipulate everything around you.
Right, which is that next echelon of training and interactivity in groups. So there's adding that gaming or the social component of learning.
Yes, and thinking, for example, now medical training. We've done some extremely interesting demos around this. So as mentioned, quite a lot of training nowadays has been done with these mannequins. So you might have been trying, CPR training with a doll, basically. So pressing the chest and trying how does it go. But as I said, these dolls aren't that immersive typically. But with mixed reality, what you could do is that you could digitally mask this mannequin with a like a digital human on top. So you could actually put the mannequin breathing or draw, a really ill face or change ethnicities or create much more immersion around this, and still have the same haptics and go and try the CPR.
Right, that's fascinating and very, very cool stuff. So I just wanted to find out as well too, is how would you normally compare, your pro or your basically your best headsets with the best in market headsets that are currently out there, like the Valve Index as an example?
Mhm.
What would be some of the main differences that you would describe as attributable to yours?
Right. So visual fidelity is definitely the first one. So Varjo offers extremely high visual quality, and this is obviously something that's hard to explain, but I think the example of reading text makes quite a lot of sense. So if you take a paper in front of you where there's text in a virtual world and view it with a Valve Index, you would not be able to read any of the text basically. But when you're looking with the same paper with Varjo, you're basically able to see it as clearly as you would see in real life.
Very
So,
nice.
so that's obviously one of the major differences. And besides that, as we've been talking, eye tracking creates super interesting possibilities, but as well as other features like this so-called automatic IPD adjustment. So it's a little feature that basically adjusts the headset optics to each user. And why this is important is because of the fact that it's been studied that 40% of all VR related cyber sickness is actually caused by a falsely set adjustment. And Varjo is basically the only device offering a automatic adjustment. So basically we're measuring each user's eye distance individually, adjusting the optics and reducing the nausea of users considerably.
Fantastic.
So I think this is all based on the fact that we're really focusing on professional users who use it in their day-to-day work.
Fantastic. That's very cool. So we talked about the hardware, and then you have built software that obviously plays out to the hardware. So as we all know in the medical space, a huge issue that oftentimes comes up is the whole idea around interoperability. So as we start to, for example, apply these sorts of technologies over time with monitoring devices, electronic health records, tracking devices, etc., how much of this has been a problem since you're a hardware software play versus, for example, a more agnostic just software? So can you talk a little bit about what that looks like for you today and in the future?
So interoperability, do you mean basically that
like how do you fit in? How does your product work with their computer systems? And
yeah, how do they integrate? Yeah,
exactly.
that's right. Yeah, that's an extremely good question. And I think the key here is to work with the companies that are actually building the systems that are running there currently. So that's why we've been working with the leading equipment manufacturers to actually ensure that there's a direct pipeline from our system to, for example, the imaging softwares that are run in the hospitals, as well as training softwares and so on and so forth.
And so the other big issue that oftentimes comes up in the healthcare space is anytime people are interacting with data or technology, there's always a concern about, is data being collected from people?
Yeah.
So, obviously you've got this bionic eye, you're sort of tracking people and where they're looking and where their hands are moving, and somehow this information gets stored somewhere. Is it getting stored in the local system? Is it getting stored in a big database? There's always comes down to questions around privacy and security. Have you been approached around those questions?
Yeah, that's actually a really good one. So actually we've been really strict on this. So we don't collect any data. So all the systems can run offline. And this has been extremely important to our customers in the medical space as well as many other fields. So obviously people are extremely consistent of not having this exchange and want to block these, but we're not even trying to do it. So it's been easy and strict.
As we project into the future, no pun intended, we're seeing modifications and rapid prototype changes with the actual hardware. And so the devices that people are using for these immersive experiences. As of late, we've seen, lots of talk about Apple Glass and the newest renditions of, what Google tried to create a few years ago, but kind of failed. They were a little too early for themselves. And then the oversimplification of things like just glasses, and then eventually these might be just digital embeds that we might have in our forehead or in our skin and in other sorts of things. Is that a concern for Varjo around what your company is doing around? Is that part of the pipeline about future research? How are you planning to adapt as people are looking into simpler and easier ways to get into the immersive experience?
I would not say that it's a threat. So I'd say that in overall we're happy if the scene is developing. So at this point, I think all developments is basically just growing the market and enabling also a bigger business for us. So in the sense, we're happy if new players come to the field and put efforts on growing the market. What comes to the future, obviously we're constantly looking into new stuff and minimizing the form factor is obviously one of kind of the key aspects in R&D. So for sure, it won't take too long to actually start seeing extremely high quality products in extremely small form factors.
And people watching this recording may have the question that they think this is very exciting. They may want to find out the question of how would they, for example, partner with Varjo? What sorts of things would they do? How would you go through a screening process? And what sorts of companies are you looking for to either partner, to develop on your platform, or to do other super exciting things? What would be some of these kinds of companies that you'd be looking to approach you?
So we work widely with all kinds of companies. So some of our customers have wider technical abilities themselves to develop the products, but then especially on the medical field, we also work with really non-technical people, doctors and radiologists and so on and so forth. So definitely we're open to all collaborations. So feel free to send me a message in LinkedIn maybe or email me. Basically it's enough that you're interested in actually creating a solution, and then we can definitely help to get started and find the right resources and softwares.
And if there's any doubting Thomases out there, the global VR market in the healthcare space is being projected to reach over $30 billion in the next 5 to 6 years. So if it's not currently on major investors' radar screens, it certainly will be. I think it's an extremely exciting space. It's still in a very highly modifiable and changeable space, and I'm really encouraging all healthcare stakeholders to look seriously into some of these things and how they can be applied in their field. So really appreciate the conversation, Ville. This has been awesome. We will be leaving a recording for anybody who wants to share this with their colleagues. Feel free to connect as well too with Impetus on our LinkedIn, YouTube, podcast channel, and connect with us as well too if these kinds of conversations are interesting for you. At the end of the day, Impetus provides an insight platform where we can have these conversations, both synchronously and asynchronously, having dialogues, sharing insights, collaborating to see how you could also potentially incorporate virtual reality, mixed reality in your platform, decide on new protocols, decide how you might be doing new research. We can actually help to house and showcase some of those discussions with your stakeholders. So thank you again very much, Ville, for being here.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
We're very excited for your company, and thanks to all of you for attending today. Have a wonderful day.